Alright, hey guys, welcome to the video. This is going to be called the odds video because I'm only doing the odd questions. I'm going to try to get through this as quick but as clear as possible so that you will be ready for your test tomorrow. The second video will be on the evens, so for those of you that were paying attention in class, I won't expect as many views as I would on this odd video. I strongly suggest that you watch these problems and how I do them because it will help you for tomorrow. My suggestion to you is to print out a blank copy and do the problem first and then watch how I did it to make sure that you did it properly. Alright, so let's get started. Our first question says determine the nature and how many and the type of the solutions given with the given information about the discriminant. Remember, your discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, so it's this part. Okay? So that means that what you will be doing for the discriminant is just replacing your b value in for b, your a value in for c, and then your for a, and then your c value in for c. If your value comes out to be positive, that's what greater than 0 means. That means that you're going to have two real solutions. If your value is equal to 0, you have one real solution. And if your value winds up being negative, you have two complex or imaginary solutions. Okay, so this was in your notes. All you had to do was look in your notes for that particular part. Alright. Next section we have says factor the greatest common factor. So the first one was 2x squared minus 8x. So the first thing that you should do is find out what can they both be divided by. These both can be divided by 2. They also have an x. There are two x's here and one x here, so they have one x in common. Once you figure out your GCF, you place it on the outside of a set of parentheses. Inside the parentheses goes your answer. So the 2's here will cancel out and you're left with 1x. The x's here will cancel out and you're left with 4. Making the answer to this question 2x times x minus 4. Now number 5, they both can be divided by 2. Here we have two y's and we have an x, meaning that they have no letters in common. There are no letters that they share. So that means that our GCF is just simply 2. So 2 goes on the outside of our parentheses. We can cancel out the 2 here, and we're left with y squared. There's nothing to cancel out here, so we just divide. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and we're left with an x. Making the answer to this question 2 times y squared minus 3x. Alright, the next one, you look at all of them, and they all can be divided by 4. And if you look at each of them, they all have at least one x in common. So that is your GCF. So the GCF will go on the outside, and then on the inside you'll put your result. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 3 x's are left after you take one of your x's away. So that's x to the third. And then the y stays the same. Then the next one, 8 divided by 4 is 2. And since that's minus, it's negative 2. X squared divided by x means that we take one x away and we're left with just x. The next one, the x's can cancel out, and we're left with just simply 5. And then the last one, you cancel out the 4's, cancel out the x's, and you're just left with y. So that's negative y. And that's the answer. You can always put it into standard form, meaning going from highest exponent down. I'm not sure if the test will be in standard form, but you can always put it in this form. Just make sure you look for the answer in your multiple choice that most matches the right answer. Okay, and that is GCF factoring. The next side is factoring using the Berry method. Or if you can't use the Berry method, you factor using perfect squares or just simply adding and seeing what multiplies. There's no number in front, so you don't have to do Berry method, but you should always start this with x and x. So now I want to know what adds to be 10 and what multiplies to be negative 24. Well, most of you probably said negative 6 times negative 4. Well, that equals positive 24, not negative, so that doesn't work. What you should have used was 12 times 2, making the 2 negative, because 12 plus negative 2 is 10. And our goal is to have a positive 10 when you add and a negative 24 when you multiply. These are the answers that you put inside the parentheses, because on a quiz a lot of you were taking these numbers and that makes no sense. So make sure that you're putting the factors in the parentheses, not the answers. Okay, number 11, this is Berry method. So you definitely should multiply the first and last. So we want two numbers that multiply to give us 6 but add to give us 5. So let's see. 3 times 2 equals 6. 3 plus 2 equals 5. That works out. So now in your parentheses, always take this section without the squared and write it twice. So we should have 3x and 3x written twice. Then we take these factors and write them in. You'll always notice that one of your factors can be divisible or divided. Sometimes it's both, but most of the time it's just one of them. So because this one can both be divided by 3, I divide by 3. And once I divide by 3, I'm left with x plus 3 divided by 3 is 1. This stays the same. Okay, and that will be your answer. So make sure that you are really looking at each one individually. Okay, next one. I have no number in the front, so now I just need two numbers that add to 26 and multiply to give me 48. Most of you know that 6 times 8 is 48. But 6 plus 8 is not 26, so that does not work. So another factor of 48 is 12 times 4. But 12 plus 4 is 16, so that also doesn't work. So the only other factors of 48 that works are, let's see, 24 times 2. 24 times 2 is 48. 24 plus 2 is 26. So now we have a problem because we need to have a negative 26. So because this last number is positive and the middle number is negative, that means I have to have same signs. And the same signs will be negative, meaning that will be those will be my factors. So now I first always start with an x and x, and then I take these numbers and put them in. Negative 24, negative 2. And now we're done. Negative 24 plus negative 2 is negative 26. Negative 24 times negative 2 is positive 48. Alright, last example is negative 36, so multiplies to be negative 36, adds to 9. So most of you know that 9 times 4 is 36. So if I did 9 times negative 4, I do get negative 36, but 9 plus negative 4 is 5, so that doesn't work. The other factor of 36 that you might have forgotten is 12 times 3. So 12 times negative 3 is negative 36. 12 plus negative 3 is 9. So these are my factors, 12 and negative 3. So first you always start with an x and x, then take your positive 12 and negative 3 and put them inside. Alright, so that takes care of your factoring part of this review. Okay, we have one more question to factor, and that is here where it says solve by factoring. Make sure you read the directions, because if it says solve by factoring, this is the way to solve it. You'll notice that this says equals 2, so I need to subtract 2 and bring it to the other side, because this should always equal 0. So the 2 will come last, so it'll be 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. So for this question, I need to do the Berry method. And the Berry method says that I multiply the first and last, and that equals negative 6. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add to negative 5. The only numbers that do that maybe are 3 and 2. So let's see. 3 plus negative 2 is 1. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Because that's 1, that's not going to work. So you should use the other factors of 6, which are 6 times 1. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. 6 plus negative 1 is 5. Okay, well, that doesn't work because they're the wrong signs. So all I have to do is just change that to a negative and change that to a positive. And now I've satisfied the factors that I need, which are negative 6 and positive 1. Now with Berry method, you should always start by writing this twice without the square. If you look, you'll notice that one of them can be reduced. And it is the first one. So I can reduce this by dividing by 3. And when I do that, I'm left with x minus 2. The second one is going to stay exactly the same, 3x plus 1. So now that I'm done factoring, I'm going to set both of my factors equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0. Therefore, x equals 2. And then on the other side, I have 3x plus 1 equals 0. Minus 1 on both sides. Divide by 3 on both sides, which a lot of you didn't do in your quiz. And you're left with negative 1/3. So you only have to set them equal to 0 when it says solve. If it doesn't say solve, you stop right here. But if it says solve, you have to take it one step further. Okay, really pay attention to this because you want to make sure you know how to solve by factoring. Alright, the next one, it's supposed to equal 0. And this one doesn't. So I'm going to add 8x and minus 3 to move it to the other side. So I'm left with 4x squared, now plus 8x, and now minus 3. This says solve by the quadratic formula, so I definitely need to use the x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so if I look at this, a equals 4, b equals 8, and c equals negative 3. So I have x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Next thing you want to do is work out what's inside the square root without square rooting it. So you put in your calculator 8 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 3. And you wind up getting 112. 112 is not a perfect square, and it's not a negative, but it still needs to be broken down. So if I break it down, I'm going to wind up having two factors because there's no negative on the inside. So when you find your factors, you should just do 112 divided by 2, 112 divided by 3, 112 divided by 4, 112 divided by 5, etc. until you get a perfect square and a non-perfect square that cannot be broken down. So when I did this, I wound up doing 112, I went all the way to 112 divided by 16, and I got 7. 7 cannot be broken down. 16 is a perfect square. So I have 16 here and 7. So once you break it down, the square root of 16 is 4. Stop right there. Don't go any further. So the answer to this question would be negative 8 plus or minus 4 with the square root of 7 all over 8. Now the problem is, this may look like something that can stay the same, but no, we have to reduce it. They all can be reduced by 4. Except for the radical, you can reduce everything by 4. So we're going to divide everything by 4. And we're left with, as our answer, negative 2 plus or minus 1 square root of 7 all over 2. Now, yes, it looks like you can divide these two, but you can't because this can't be divided by 2. So you have to leave it like this. Now, the only thing you could do is separate it. So answer 1 would be negative 2 plus square root of 7, because there was an imaginary 1 there, over 2. And negative 2 minus the square root of 7 over 2. Alright, the next one is 21. It says 4x squared minus 9. It's supposed to equal 0, so I'll do minus 9. And I'm left with 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. I notice that these are both perfect squares. So I can factor, because it says any method. So any method means quadratic formula or factoring. So I'm going to factor, taking the square root, and when I square root it, I get 2x minus 3. But you know you're supposed to have two answers, so the other answer is 2x plus 3. So now I take each of my factors and make them both equal to 0. So the first one would be 2x minus 3 equals 0, and the one on the right is 2x plus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides. Divide by 2. X equals 3 over 2. On the other side, minus 3. 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2. X equals negative 3 over 2. Okay, so if you can factor, factor. If it says any method. If you can't factor, use quadratic formula. Okay, last section are the i's. The first one says t minus s. So you're going to do t, which is 1 minus 4i, minus s, which is negative 2 plus I. Make sure that you carry everything over. So this is 1 minus negative 2. And when you do leave, change, change, that's equal to 3. On this side, we have negative 4i minus I, which equals really negative 5i. So the answer to this question is 3 minus 5i. Okay, the next one says s times r. So you're going to do negative 2 plus I times 5 plus 6i. Now I'm going to draw a box because I know you guys like the box method. Negative 2 plus I, 5 plus 6i. And then you multiply. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. 5 times I is 5i. Negative 2 times 6 is 12i. And 6i times I is 6i squared. Put these two together and you get 17i. So after you FOIL, it's 10 plus 17i plus 6i squared. Remember, I squared equals negative 1. So you're really going to change this to negative 1. When you multiply this, you wind up getting negative 6. So it's negative 10 plus 17i minus 6. Combine your like terms, and your final answer is negative 16 plus 17i. Just really, really be careful in everything that you're doing. Okay. This one right here should have been negative 12. My bad. And, oops. This should have been negative 7. So please watch out for those little mistakes, because even we make mistakes too. Okay, so it should have been negative 16 plus 7i. Sorry. Alright, last questions. T over V. So T over V would be 1 minus 4i over negative 5i. This is just like the warm-up question. So you multiply by positive 5i. So the conjugate means that you only change the I, nothing else. So now I'm going to distribute, just like I did in the warm-up today, and I get 5i minus 20i squared. Divide that by multiplying these two, and you get negative 25i squared. So remember, I squared equals negative 1. So negative 20i squared really becomes positive 20. And negative 25i squared really becomes 25. So when you put it together, you get 20 plus 5i all over 25. So that means that you need to reduce, because this is a all divisible by 5. So I can divide by 5, divide by 5, divide by 5. And my final answer will be 4 plus I, because 5 divided by 5 is 1, over I. 5. Okay, so really, really watch what you're doing there. Okay, last question is, this is negative 17. So I'm going to split it up. And after I split it up, I wind up getting negative 1 times 17. 17 is what's called a prime number, so it cannot be broken down. But the negative, which is negative 1, is really equal to I. So you're going to write it in this order. I, then the square root of 17. Always put I first when you have a square root. Alright, there's one last thing, which is the secret message. And the secret message is, I will pass quarter 2. Okay, it's very important that you have this in your mind. It's a very positive message, and you will pass. And you'll pass with my help if you come in for help, and of course if you watch these videos. Another thing I need you to write at the top of your paper, this will tell me if you watch the video, is I want you to write your email address and your real email, not no fake one, but your real email address at the top of your test paper. I'm going to keep a database of your email addresses, because that way if there's something that I need to let you know that you're not checking Edline, I can just email you, and most of you have smartphones anyway where you can check your email. Also, I want your email so that if for some reason you don't have access to Edline, I can at least send you these videos on your email. Okay, everyone should have an email, and if you don't, please spend some time with me after class and I will set one up for you. Okay, so these are the 2 things that I expect to see on the top of your paper. I am not going to write them on Edline, so I hope that you have looked at this. Alright, good luck everybody.